Hi, I'm Kale. This is the first video on my channel, and it is the first video in a series called Crate Digging, where I will choose one album from my record collection and just do a book report on it. Today's album is Let It Be by the Beatles. If anyone cares, this is a repressing from 2021, the Giles Martin remix. Let It Be is the Beatles' final studio album, released in April of 1970. It has the singles, The Long and Winding Road and Let It Be, and I think that's it. I'm pretty sure those are the only A-side singles, but yeah. The album has John Lennon on guitar, slide guitar, and 6-string bass and vocals, obviously. Paul McCartney on bass, some keyboards, and I think guitar, and vocals, of course. And George Harrison also on vocals and lead and rhythm guitar. Ringo Starr on drums and various percussion instruments. That's kind of his thing. Various percussion instruments. And Phil Spector producing, which I will get into later. There are also other mixes by Glyn Johns and George Martin. And this is a mix by Giles Martin. So technically I wasn't incorrect, but yeah. This album was recorded in January of 1969 at EMI Studios, and one of the tracks was recorded early 1968, but I'll get to that later in the track-by-track breakdown. It was recorded in 1969 in EMI Studios during quite how should I say this, a rough time in the band. I'm gonna say that in literally every Beatles episode I do. That's just something that they did. Ringo Starr, their drummer, had stormed out of sessions during the recording of the previous album, the White Album, but he came back later, and during these sessions, George Harrison, the lead guitarist, just kinda noped. He just up and left, just cuz. I don't know, it just cuz. And they were considering replacing him with Eric Clapton. That would have been weird. That would have been a completely different album. And next to all of that, John Lennon and Yoko Ono were going through a serious heroin problem, which not great for creativity. And Paul McCartney was fine. He was chill. He wasn't going through anything. In their previous record, the White Album, they had started to go back to their basics a little bit. Not like Mercy Beat per se, but more of their original bluesy, like roots rock. And they did that even more in Let It Be, especially in tracks like I've Got a Feeling and One After 909, which is literally just an early Beatles song. They wrote that in the late 50s, and they actually recorded a version in 1963, but it was never released until, I think, the anthology. The recording process for this album was very all over the place, shall we say. They just kind of came into the studio and wrote the songs as they went in like a period of 2 weeks. Very chaotic, and that's probably what led to their breakup, but I'll get to that in another video. But it was very just kind of, they came in, wrote a song, and then dipped. It was all of, if not all, of the recording sessions were caught on film by director Michael Lindsay Hogg for an upcoming documentary film about the Beatles called Let It Be. It was supposed to be released in 1969, but it was not. It was released in 1970 with a lot less footage, and that footage that was not used, director Peter Jackson used in a documentary for Disney Plus called Get Back, which basically just details the entire, I mean literally like basically the entire recording sessions of January 1969 that they were The original producers for the album were George Martin and audio engineer Glyn Johns, and it was originally going to be called Get Back, and the cover was going to be a mirroring of their Please Please Me album, but they didn't use that and ended up using that cover picture for the 1967 and 1970 compilation album, or the Blue Album. There are also a few songs that were left off of the record, like Teddy Boy, which is on Paul McCartney's self-titled debut record, which actually I'm pretty sure came out like a few weeks before Let It Be, and like a Motown cover, but I can't remember the name of it for the Last Dance for Me. That's what it was called. Yeah. There were numerous fights throughout the recording sessions, which threw riffs and everything, and George leaving did not help that at all, obviously. And there were a few times where they could have actually broken up right then and there, but they decided to stick it through for another year. Lighter news, musician Billy Preston played electric piano and organ on most of the tracks, actually. Yeah, he was, and on Get Back, I think the single version, he is the only artist besides Tony Sheridan that is credited on a Beatles track that's not the Beatles themselves. I think that was worded correctly. This amalgamation of recording process and film that they were making all at the same time in a span of 2 weeks was originally going to be, the film itself was originally going to lead up to a massive concert, and they didn't know where the concert was going to be. They were like planning, I think it said like the Coliseum at one point. Didn't do that. Instead, they opted for something far more exotic. The roof of EMI Records. Yeah, they just went up to the top of the roof and sung some songs. And that's actually where the recordings of some of the songs on the album come from. Like, I'm pretty sure Dig a Pony, the version on the album, is one of the rooftop versions. Yeah, they just went up to the roof and started singing. Anyway, let's break this down track by track. So the first song on Let It Be is Two of Us, which is widely believed to be about the Lennon and McCartney songwriting duo throughout the years, but most likely it's just about Linda McCartney or Yoko Ono, if we're being completely honest. That's probably what it's about. Little cheery, like folk pop tune, sort of. It does drag a little bit, I gotta say. They come in with the drum intro with the snare like 3 times, and it's just unnecessary. Like, the song, it seems like it's gonna end like 4 times, but it keeps coming back, and it's like, it's an okay song. It's not a bad song. I like the song. It doesn't need to keep coming back, though. Anyway, track number 2 is Dig a Pony. Like I said earlier, I think this is one of the few tracks on this album that was actually recorded on the rooftop. Just another way good old Phil Spector butchered this album was by cutting out the actual intro of the song, which just started with All I Want Is, and then ... and then it actually starts. And of course, old Philip, like he ruins everything in his life, decided to cut that out. I really do not like Phil Spector. Can you guys tell? He kept in the false start, but he took out the intro. Why is this guy such a popular producer? Dig a Pony is my personal favorite song on the album, so there's that. Alright, number 3, Across the Universe. So you know how, like, 10 seconds ago I was talking about how much Phil Spector sucked? And I know a lot of people say that Phil Spector butchered Across the Universe by putting in the choir vocals and taking away just the raw vocals. I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly, actually. I think that this is the one good thing Phil Spector contributed to this album. The orchestral stuff on Across the Universe. It's more ethereal. It really is, and I don't care what people say. It's better with the choir and the orchestra. Not orchestra, the choir. The song that I was talking about that was actually recorded a year prior in early 1968, I think March 1968. Well, I, I think it was during the sessions that they recorded Lady Madonna and Hey Bulldog, but that also could have just been when the Lady Madonna single was released, and I'm confusing it with that. I'm confusing it with that. I Me Mine is the 4th track on the album, and I lied actually. I Me Mine is my favorite song on the album. I kind of forgot about it for a second. Can't believe it. But yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's sort of like solo George, sort of. It seems like it would be on All Things Must Pass. And that might just be me, but it's nice. It's like that little waltzy blues sort of thing. The drums on the song are underrated. Ringo does some excellent work on this song. The reasons that George stormed out of the sessions early for a little bit was because Paul was trying to change some stuff on I Me Mine, and he didn't like that. He wanted the refrain, or the I guess technically it's kind of the chorus, the I me mine. He didn't like that I was spoken twice, so he tried to get rid of that, and that was one of the main reasons why George left. It seems a little bit petty. I don't know. Oh boy. Number 5 is Dig It. Do we really count this? It's a song though. It's more like a little interlude or a jam. It's not bad. It's kind of catchy even. I like it more than a certain song on this album that we will get to. The full version, like the 4-minute like jam that's in Let It Be and Get Back, it's nice actually. I'd like if that substituted the certain song on this album, I think that would be nice. Number 6, arguably the most famous song on this album, if not the most famous Beatles song, Let It Be. It is one of the greats on the album. It isn't my favorite, and I will argue that it is a little bit overrated, but like, oh my god, my hair's going wild right now. But, you know, it's good. It's a good song. That was a really vague and obvious statement. More Phil Spector slander. The choir on this, not it at all. Just the raw, like, stripped down version is far superior than the choir vocals. Not on Across the Universe though. Let It Be, the choir vocals just don't sit right. It doesn't feel right. On this song, John actually plays bass, and Billy Preston on the Hammond organ, and that, which is very underrated on the song. People don't talk about the organ on the song, but it's pretty good. It was released as a single for the album, backed with the just horrifying amalgamation that is You Know My Name, Look Up the Number. Oh my god. That song, I simply have no words over that song. It is, I literally cannot describe it, but not in a good way, but also not in a bad way. It is an enigma. Didn't spend that long on Let It Be, but there's not much I can say about it, you know? It's an iconic Beatles song, and sometimes that's really all you can say with Beatles songs. You have track 7, Maggie May. Maggie May is a traditional Liverpudlian folk song. This isn't really even a song on the album. It's more of like what Dig It is, just sort of random nonsense in between. They sing like 2 lines and then it just fizzles out. It doesn't serve much purpose. But I can give you a history lesson on the song if you want me to. You don't? I don't care, I'm gonna do it anyway. The song is believed to be written in the 1600s about a prostitute that robs a homeward bounder by the cast iron shore. So that's fantastic. In the original version, or the most popular version, circulating around the 1700s to early 1800s, good old Maggie May gets the good old hammer of justice right on her head, and she gets sent to Australia. Because that's what they did with prisoners back then. They sent them to Australia. So it's a nice old folk song about a prostitute that robs a sailor and then gets sent to Australia. Well, that's just great. No one knows the original writer. It's just like a traditional folk song. Okay, and now side 2. We got I Got a Feeling. So, you know how earlier I said Dig a Pony and I Me Mine were my favorite on this album? I was wrong. I Got a Feeling is great. It's just happy, you know? Nice happy, oh my god, it's a nice happy, you know, cheery song. Can't believe I'm saying this, but I need a haircut. It was originally two different songs. It was Paul McCartney's I've Got a Feeling and then John Lennon's Everybody's Had a Hard Year. And then they were like, we can't finish this, so they just stuck it together. And it worked really well, actually. The way they kind of sing over each other in the final part is like one of my favorite parts of the album. It's a really random fact, but like apparently it was John Lennon originally wrote the Everybody Had a Hard Year part in like November of 1968, right after the White Album came out, and he made a demo tape and performed it in front of like his home camera, and that home camera tape was then like put in Yoko Ono's film, A Word I Cannot Say on YouTube, volume 6, and that is now a lost film, so I believe it's a lost film, so we don't have the original footage from 1968 of John Lennon singing that Everybody Had a Hard Year verse, which is kind of sad, because that would have been kind of cool to see. Editing kill here. That film is not lost at all. I don't know why I said that. I mean, this is one of the most back to basics track on the album. Paul McCartney on vocals and bass, John Lennon on rhythm guitar and vocals, George Harrison on lead guitar, and then Ringo Starr on drums. And Billy Preston on keyboards, yeah, I know, but, you know, in terms of the Beatles, basically the same lineup as their early days. Second track on side 2 is One After 909. Was originally written by John Lennon in the late 50s when he was a teenager, and they played it in, you know, their early days. They played it a lot at the Cavern Club. There's actually some footage of them playing it at the Cavern Club in 1961, I think. And I think during the recording sessions for From Me to You, they recorded like a demo of it as possibly being on the B-side or on With the Beatles, I think, or Hard Day's Night, whichever one was coming up. But they ultimately decided that no, and that version was actually on the anthology. About a guy that's trying to catch his train, man. But he can't, because he's really stupid. I mean, first he goes to the wrong train station, and then the next thing he gets the number wrong. I don't really know what that's referring to. The train number, I guess? Next is The Long and Winding Road, which was the last official Beatles single that was released, backed with the song will not be named. And it's a bit like Let It Be, where it's just a Paul McCartney piano ballad, vastly ruined by old Philip Spector, just like he ruins everything. Gee, I apologize, I don't know what got into me. I actually favor Long and Winding Road to Let It Be. It's a bit more, I don't want to say emotional, because like Let It Be is straight up gospel. Like, it can't get more emotional. It just seems more personal. It was perfectly fine with guitar instead of horn. Philip. 3 worst things that Phil Spector did was imprison his wife, murder someone, and producing Let It Be. Oh boy. Next song is just, oh, it's just my favorite song. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. It's just my favorite, and it's just so good. And it's just, I love it so much, and it's just so good. I hate For You Blue. I'm sorry. I don't like it at all. I don't. It's like, it's just annoying. I don't like the slide guitar. The solo's kind of sick, but like it just interfering with everything else. Like he's just singing, and then all of a sudden you just hear, that's not needed. That was a fantastic slide guitar impression, by the way. Also, I don't like the like duct taped like piano strings or whatever they did with it. They tried to make it sound like a honky-tonk piano, but they just made it sound like a depressed guitar, and I don't like it at all. It doesn't help that like the vocals are like really compressed. I'm one to talk Me speaking is very quiet. Turn the volume up. Sort of like Old Brown Shoe, another George song, which I know was on purpose, but also just sounds like just absolute, just not great. It ends up sounding like he's singing 10 feet away from the microphone. I don't like it, and I never will, so don't try to change me. Okay, final track, Get Back. I was gonna say the title track, and then I realized that that is not how that works. Get Back it's good. I like it. Get Back is good. It's a little annoying and a little bit too, I don't want to say too popular, at risk of me sounding like a music snob. It's a great song. It's a fine song. You know, every Beatles song is a fine song, except for Free You Blue. But you know, instead of slandering it, I guess I'll give you some facts. It was originally released 2 months after it was recorded in. Wait, that's not how months work. It was originally released 3 months after it was recorded in April of 1969, backed with Don't Let Me Down, which should have made this godforsaken album, I swear to God, but it didn't. I don't know why. But yeah, Get Back was released as a double A side with Don't Let Me Down, and they're two of the most iconic Beatles songs to this day. Also included on the 1967 and 1970 compilation album from 1973. Actually all started with George Harrison's song, Sour Milk Sea, the lyrics, Get Back from Where You Once Belong, I think it was, and then Paul McCartney was just kind of fooling around, and he was like, get back to where you once belonged, stupid. And then it turned into a protest song against the British government about immigration, but that kind of went out the window after like a day. Single version, way better than the album version. It has that little breakdown at the end, it's real funky. This one just ends, and then Paul McCartney goes, nah, the single version's way better. It's like, kind of groovy at the end. Why did I say groovy? Well, that's every track on the album. Oh, you guys, it's my cat. Look at him. Look how stupid he looks. That's every track on the album. Now let's get into my thoughts, because obviously that's the most important part of this video. Alright, look, my thoughts are, it's okay. It's not the Beatles' best, but it's not the Beatles' worst, you know? Would have been far better if Phil Spector was out of the window, you know? And if it was just George Martin. Hell, even Glyn Johns. If it was just Glyn Johns, it would be fine. You know, he produced some great records in 1969, you know? Led Zeppelin. It's the only one I can think of right now, but you know what I mean. Yes, I like the Back to Basics stuff, but I think it was done a lot better on the White Album than it was on Let It Be, which I know is a hot take, because like Let It Be has One After 909, which is literally an old Beatles song, but like all in all, the blues stuff they were doing on the White Album felt more mature, but also still Back to Basics, while this just feels like, you know, a Quarrymen album, if the Quarrymen became the Quarrymen instead of the Beatles, you know? Now, there is no bad Beatles album, obviously. This isn't their strongest, but it's also not their weakest. I know what their weakest is, and I will do a video on it. You guys are gonna get really mad at me for it. You know, they did the best they could for recording for 2 weeks while a band member left, a lot of addiction, Ringo. Under their circumstances, they did a fantastic job for making an album, you know? And that is my main takeaway from this album. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. And thanks for liking and subscribing. Thank you for doing that. I see that you're doing that now, and that's very cool of you. I have no respect for you if that's not what you were doing. First video. Bye.